she's staring at.
Mega Man Dr. Wily's Revenge got the Blue Bombers run on Game Boy off to a fine start, while Mega Man 2 fumbled a bit before Mega Man 3 steered the ship straight ahead. But these were rather unambitious portable takes on stuff you may have already played on the 8-bit Nintendo, with some unique additions to make them more than just portable NES fare. But then along comes Mega Man 4, obviously the fourth Game Boy entry released in 1993, and while on the surface we're following what came before, Wily reviving Mega Man 4 and 5 bosses in this case, and we're going through that whole process again, this isn't exactly business as usual. Not entirely, at least. Mega Man 4 opens with a cutscene getting players up to speed on the plot and also telling you about P-Chips, the in-game currency used to purchase items from Dr. Light's lab, otherwise known as the Shop System, the first appearance of such a feature in Mega Man proper. Then we have a new stage select screen with 4 Mega Man 4 bosses. Business as usual at this point. Defeating one of the bosses will drop Rush Coil, which operates as it always did. Also hidden within this first wave of levels are circuit plates that spell out beat, and collecting all 4 plates will add beat to your arsenal of weapons. It's a bird that strikes at enemies, first appearing in Mega Man 5. Nowadays, it's the bird that saves your ass whenever you fall into a pit. But that's another story. Once the first wave of stages are cleared, we open up a Wily level, which is short but has more working bits going for it than usual, such as an opening cutscene and the introduction of our third and final Mega Man killer, Ballad. This of course opens up the second wave of stages helmed by the only 4 bosses from Mega Man 5 to grace the monochrome Game Boy. As before, clearing the last 4 stages opens up the last set of levels, but unlike past efforts, in order to actually play these levels, you'll need to uncover Wily circuit plates hidden throughout the 4 stages. Without these, Mega Man just sort of stands there for a bit and goes home afterwards. Now that's a twist that we didn't need, and thank fuck this was a one-time thing that never saw the light of day again because it's needlessly redundant. Just clearing the stages should be enough of a requirement to play the end stages, and if you wanted to give the player something extra to do in this second set of stages, maybe some hidden tools or upgrades that could benefit the player, they'd figured this out in 5, which is good because they showed that they learned something, but here, with the Wily plates, not a fan. Mega Man 4 also introduces a unique mechanic to your Mega Buster in that firing fully charged shots will cause you to recoil a short distance back. It's not as bad as the knockback suffered from taking a hit, and you can sort of negate this with forward motion, but it is something you need to be mindful of, especially on narrow edges. This is another thing that lasted only one game, but I actually didn't mind this. It's an added risk that also emphasizes how powerful the Mega Buster can be. So powerful the guy firing it winces a bit. And then they replaced it with bootleg Hard Knuckle in the next game, but that's another story. And of course there's a shop system in which you could buy items using P-Chips acquired during gameplay. It's a bare bones shop. You can purchase 1-ups, energy tanks, weapon tanks, super tanks, and the energy balancer that automatically refills the more empty weapons in your arsenal. But you can also spend 80 P-Chips to recharge your weapons, and why would you do this? Because much like in Mega Man 2 on Game Boy, clearing the stage in the back end of the game does not automatically refill all your weapons. So if you spam one weapon in one stage, they'll be empty when you enter another. So you could either spend 80 P-Chips on this helpful service, or you could find one of those chicken things and shoot its eggs for pickups. Those are usually a good place to farm for energy and P-Chips. There's also one last addition that rarely gets mentioned, and that's because it involves getting lots of game overs on the same stage. Feeling you're not quite getting the job done, Dr. Light will upgrade your Mega Buster with an improved version that does slightly more damage. This only lasts until you turn off the Game Boy and is not recorded with a password, and honestly, it's not that much of a help. It's simply a wider shot, and that's about it. Though people would consider Mega Man 5 as a high point in the Game Boy line, a lot of the groundwork for that game was established in here, Mega Man 4, which aimed to be a more involved and unique adventure compared to its predecessors, particularly in terms of storytelling with its cutscenes and also its in-game events playing out. The second Wily stage is a good example of it, which sees you fighting and eventually defeating Ballad, but it doesn't end with said boss fight, but rather adds an extra bit where you have to escape the exploding tank, which is little more than what you get out of typical Mega fare at the time. For context, Mega Man 4 first saw release in Japan in October of 1993, a few months before Mega Man X would grace the 16-bit Super Famicom in December. And yes, I'm calling it Mega Man 4 and not Rockman World 4, which sounds more like I'm playing a Super Mario level or something. Mega Man 4 is a more ambitious entry than its predecessors, not only setting the stage for the next game, but also planting the seeds of evolution for the rest of the series in some fashion. But setting that all aside, the game itself is pretty damn slick. Gameplay in general is pretty solid, as are the controls, which are as tight as ever. There are some nice tweaks made to the weapons. Ring boomerangs can be used to grab out-of-reach items. Rain Flesh can solidify quicksand, making it easier to navigate. Power Stone is practically worthless, however. Aside from being an already difficult weapon to use effectively, it also causes the game to slow down quite a bit. And slowdown is something you'll have to contend with in Mega Man 4 and also 5, and it's not always the most pleasant thing. Control, as mentioned, is also fairly tight and responsive, unless you're on shaky ground, in which case it's 50-50, but other than that, it's mostly solid. Graphically, Mega Man 4 looks like Mega Man, so we've got that covered. Mega Man and bosses look pretty top-notch. Enemies adapt to the smaller screen quite nicely, either retaining their original size or scaled down accordingly, and the levels look pretty damn good by Game Boy standards. Now, while the gameplay bits are business as usual visually, it's the overall presentation around those bits that got a bit of an overhaul, with a new stage select screen that's a little more dynamic and unique compared to the usual static mugshots of past games, showing off the terrain that you're going to be invading. There's a couple more cutscenes that aren't just using in-game elements. There's clearly more production put into this thing compared to previous games in this line, and even Mega Man 5 doesn't quite go as far as this game does, in some respects I don't think. But then again, that game didn't really need to, but that's another story we'll get to eventually. Sound-wise, Mega Man 4 sounds like Mega Man. We're using the same sound effects from the previous game, which is fine because those are the best sound effects they could use for this series and come closest to replicating the NES sound effects. Not quite there, but close enough. Music is largely lesser but still quality versions of the NES tracks, but there's also a fair share of quality original tracks. Probably some of the better tracks in this sub-series as a whole, and that includes Mega Man 5. There's more of a foreboding sense in these tracks that imply great stakes here, and it complements the narrative quite nicely. Whatever you want to say about the recycled bits, the one thing that doesn't apply with Mega Man 4 is cookie cutter. They tried something different and kept that ball rolling for the next game. Overall, Mega Man 4 on Game Boy is another solid entry in the Mega Man series, a small step forward for the overall franchise, and just tremendously all-around fun. Not much else to say, this game's great, and if you've somehow never played this one, it's definitely worth checking out.